You say you're exhausted with your job. Every Monday feels heavier than it should for a normal time horizon. But what if the real risk isn't the work, it's the pressure behind it? Try adding up your fixed monthly costs. Rent, car loan, student debt, credit cards quietly compounding in the background. The numbers may carry more volatility than your manager ever did. If your lifestyle costs $4,000 a month, your margin becomes thin. A thin margin reduces flexibility during income drawdown. That is not hatred, that is dependency. Many young professionals believe they are trapped by their office, but often the long-term trap is lifestyle inflation. When expenses compound faster than skills, pressure replaces purpose. This is the margin. Here we examine the uncomfortable math behind modern salaries and cost of living. Today you will see why job frustration is often just financial pressure with a different name. Early career workers say they want to quit almost every week, yet most of them never actually resign. Something invisible keeps them in place. It is not always fear of failure. It is fear of missing next month's payment. That risk feels immediate and very real. We blame workplace culture. We blame managers and corporate volatility. Rarely do we question our cost structure. When fixed expenses rise, your job stops being optional. It becomes a non-negotiable obligation. Obligation over time feels like a cage. Burnout is not always about long hours. It often comes from having no alternative path. No alternative means no control over your time horizon. Control disappears when margin disappears. Margin disappears when fixed costs absorb your income. The math is simple and quietly brutal. Many people still like their actual field. What they dislike is constant financial pressure and drawdown risk. The pressure comes from numbers, not passion. We say we hate our job. Often we hate financial dependence. That shift in interpretation changes the long-term strategy. Diagnosis shapes strategy. If you misread the problem, you misallocate time and risk. So we slow down and examine the numbers carefully. Let's look at simple math. You take home $5,000 a month. $4,000 is already committed before you even think. That leaves $1,000 flexible. And that is before risk shows up. The margin is thinner than it looks. Now imagine you want to resign. How many months can your savings absorb a drawdown? Is your time horizon measured in weeks? If the answer is 2 months, your career decision is no longer free. Time becomes the silent manager. Volatility feels personal. The more expensive your life becomes, the shorter the distance between stress and crisis. Fixed costs reduce flexibility. This is structural, not emotional. Many professionals receive raises every year, but commitments rise at the same speed. The margin rarely compounds. A raise feels like progress, but often it only offsets lifestyle inflation. The treadmill keeps moving under your feet. When the treadmill stops, there is no stable ground. Cash flow interruption feels like a fall. The drawdown hits faster than expected. This is where resentment begins. You think you hate the job, but what you lack is flexibility, not purpose. Lifestyle is not just consumption. It is a social signal that quietly communicates where you stand. And once that signal is sent, lowering it feels like risk. A certain apartment can feel like leveling up. A certain car can feel like validation. Status often hides inside monthly payments. When you think about resigning, it is not only income at stake. It is the image you built over time. Identity has a long-term time horizon. That is why the decision feels heavy. The job may not be unbearable, but your cost structure makes change volatile. We fear looking like we are moving backward, more than we fear feeling tired. Social drawdown feels more painful than burnout. Social media amplifies comparison. Colleagues quietly become benchmarks. The standard compounds without discussion. The higher the standard, the higher the maintenance cost. Every upgrade increases financial fragility. Few people calculate that risk clearly. Identity slowly attaches to spending. Instead of attaching to values or long-term goals, that framing distorts financial decisions. When identity and expenses merge, decisions become emotional. Emotional decisions increase volatility, and volatility rarely supports long-term compounding. Many people chase financial freedom as a distant finish line. Very few focus on building flexibility first. But flexibility is the real foundation of a stable long-term plan. If your monthly cost of living drops, your career options expand. Lower overhead reduces risk exposure. The math quietly improves your time horizon. Flexibility gives you the option to change jobs without panic. It allows you to study again without fearing immediate drawdown. It gives space to take measured risks. Without margin, every decision feels volatile. With margin, uncertainty becomes manageable. The difference is structural, not emotional. You may not hate your job. You may hate the feeling of being trapped. Those are two different interpretations of the same situation. The constraint is rarely the employment contract. The real constraint is financial commitments, and commitments can be redesigned over time. This does not require extreme lifestyle changes. It does not demand selling everything. It begins with awareness of structure and small adjustments. Flexibility does not mean living small. It means living adjustable. Adjustable systems handle volatility better over the long term. Modern life carries constant uncertainty. Rigid structures crack under pressure. Flexible structures absorb shocks and continue compounding quietly. Let's call this the cost of freedom ratio. It measures how much of your net income is locked into fixed costs. The higher it is, the more expensive your freedom becomes. If your ratio is above 70%, your options shrink fast. Most of your income is already committed before the month begins. That is not laziness, that is structural pressure. Below 60%, you begin to breathe differently. Decisions feel less reactive and more rational. Time horizon becomes longer and clearer. This framework is not about blame. It is about measurement. What gets measured can be adjusted over the long term. Calculated honestly, not based on image but on real numbers. Risk feels different when you face the math. If the number is high, it is not the end. It is a design problem, and design can be redesigned over time. Reduce commitments before adding new ones. Build liquidity before upgrading lifestyle. Compounding works better when your base is stable. Test every big decision. Imagine your income drops 20% during volatility. If that scenario creates panic, reconsider the commitment. Freedom does not come from a bigger salary alone. It comes from a structure that can survive drawdown. That shift in mindset changes everything over the long term. Starting a career in expensive cities compresses your financial margin immediately. Rent, transport, and basic living costs consume income before compounding even begins. The risk feels personal, but it is structural. Many fresh graduates adopt the city's lifestyle instantly. There is no time horizon for adaptation or financial stabilization. Volatility begins before income maturity. Ambition is not the problem. Ambition without margin creates emotional drawdown. When every dollar is allocated, anxiety compounds faster than savings. Leveling up should expand options, not restrict them. If promotion increases fixed cost faster than income, flexibility declines. Long-term freedom depends on controlled expansion. Working hard is normal in early career stages. Feeling trapped by fixed obligations is a different signal. One reflects effort, the other reflects structural risk. Before blaming your career, examine your cost structure. Sometimes the issue is not income but volatility exposure. Small structural adjustments can reduce long-term stress. Not everyone needs to resign to feel better. Sometimes reducing financial pressure improves decision quality. Pressure often comes from numbers, not identity. Reducing expenses is not surrender. It is strategic risk management within your time horizon. Margin creates psychological stability. A flexible life often feels quieter. Lower fixed cost reduces emotional drawdown during uncertainty. Calm structure improves long-term decision-making. If you still enjoy your field, maybe you do not actually hate your job. You might just be too financially committed to change direction. When your fixed cost is high, every career move feels like a risk. High expenses amplify perceived risk. Extreme risk reduces your time horizon for bold decisions. Staying feels safer than facing volatility. This cycle is not broken by motivation alone. It is broken by adjusting structure and numbers. Math reduces emotional drawdown. Start by calculating your ratio clearly. Then slowly reduce long-term commitments that lock your cash flow. Small structural changes expand future options. Every dollar removed from fixed cost increases flexibility. It may not look glamorous in the short term, but flexibility compounds over the long term. Smart professionals do not only chase higher salary, they evaluate risk exposure and personal volatility. Mobility is a hidden asset in uncertain markets. When you have room to move, work becomes a choice again. Choice reduces emotional pressure. Pressure reduction improves long-term thinking. When control returns, resentment slowly fades. You realize the job was not the core problem. The structure around it was. You are not weak for feeling stuck. The structure may simply be too heavy for your income, and structures can be redesigned over time. Not all exhaustion comes from the job itself. Some of it comes from invisible financial risk accumulating quietly in the background. And unlike emotions, that pressure can actually be measured over time. If you feel trapped, the first place to look is not your boss but your numbers. A high fixed cost ratio reduces flexibility and shortens your time horizon. Sometimes the problem is structural, not emotional. A smaller lifestyle with margin can outperform a higher salary with volatility. Margin absorbs drawdown and protects your long-term stability. Freedom is not loud, but it compounds quietly. There is nothing wrong with leveling up your income, but every upgrade increases fixed exposure and financial risk. The question is whether your flexibility grows at the same speed. This is the margin. We do not sell certainty, we examine risk, volatility, and structure with calm clarity. If you want to understand money through numbers instead of noise, we will meet again in the next episode.